I'm just chatting away on mute. Have we started recording yet?
Yes.
All right, never mind then.
You want to introduce us? No. You can.
Come on, Luke.
Wait, what?
Introduce us. Introduce the meeting.
Welcome to the backdrop design and usability meeting.
Perfect. Today is May 7th, just in case everyone watches all of the meetings and wants to know which one is which. And we should all introduce each other as well, or maybe ourselves. So maybe Tim, do you want to give us a name, location, something exciting snippet? Tim, do you want to go first?
Am I still unmuted? Yes, I am. Hi, I'm Tim. I am coming to you from Deerwood, Minnesota this year, it seems, and still quarantined in the Northwoods, and have been very unproductive and distracted lately, so I haven't been doing much backdrop stuff. Every week I come to these meetings hoping it'll get me back on track, so let's see what we can do today. Thanks.
Luke.
I am Luke McCormick, coming to you from San Ramon, California. And after watching the presentation I gave last week, I'm going to try not to wave my hands at the camera as much as I sometimes do. So I'm going to try to keep them chained to my side.
I really like the enthusiasm, even if it involves hand waving, so I didn't mind. How about Joseph? Do you want to introduce yourself?
I am Joseph from Las Vegas, Nevada, and yeah, I'm just here to see how I can help.
Great. I am Jen Lampton from Oakland, California. I guess I don't have anything super exciting to share, so we'll just move on. First item in the agenda is the Design Theme User Experience Initiative update. So today is the day that we are discussing initiative proposals in the developer meeting, which is in about half an hour. So I'm really excited about the Design Theme Initiative. I don't know if everyone is going to agree with it, and we're going to decide it's one that goes to the PMC, but fingers crossed it is. I don't know if we have any updates since the last time we chatted about it in this meeting, but maybe Luke, you could give us sort of a recap of what that is in case someone watching this meeting didn't watch the last one we talked about it.
Sure. There's actually two levels of updates. There's updates that I've made, and there's updates that I've thought about but haven't made yet, but I can talk about right now. But the initial proposal that we had as of 2 weeks ago was that I thought I proposed that we should include ready-to-go themes with backdrop, so that somebody who doesn't know how to theme, either doesn't know the technology involved in theme, doesn't understand CSS, HTML, JavaScript, and PHP sufficient to do the theme, or somebody who maybe knows all that stuff but doesn't know whether to make things red or blue, or what point size to make things. Like there's a considerable both technical and visual skill level that's required to either create a theme from scratch or even customize a theme. So I was proposing that we shouldn't have that as a barrier to entry for backdrop, that we should provide a handful of ready to go out of the box solutions where you could just do nothing more complicated than just picking from a limited set of choices, A, B, or C. Start with that and see how you feel. And they should look different. It shouldn't just be just one. There should be a couple, so that people, even if you don't know all that stuff, can understand, oh, okay, it could be blue jeans or it could be a tuxedo, right? Like there's different ways things can look. So the update that I made a few days ago to it is I renamed it from, it was originally that I suggested that several ready-to-use themes should be included with backdrop. And people objected that might bloat the code size, and there were some other issues. So I changed that to more the functional language that you should be able to have a good looking, I forget what phrasing I used for it, but I agonized a little bit over the subject line. But the upshot is that users, site builders, should be able to make a usable version of a backdrop out of the box without having to customize things. And the change I was going to make today was actually more that I'm still, yeah. I guess, are we voting on it in the next hour? Is that when the decision gets made, or?
Well, so in the next hour, we're going to discuss all of the proposals we have and decide on which ones to escalate to the PMC for a vote. So I'm not sure we'll vote in the meeting, but we're going to chat about it, and there will probably be a bunch that everybody agrees on, and then a bunch that we're like, meh, and then we'll take the ones we agree on and take them upstream for an actual vote.
Okay, well then we still have a little time, you know, to make the presentation of the idea match the concept behind it, which is, it's really a functional concept. It's not so much how it gets done, but the end result is looking for ways so that somebody who is, you know, merely a site builder, you know, somebody who just is only knowledgeable about the content that they're bringing, still has options. And now we've talked about other things that kind of extend from this, about the idea of a theme testing facility, either page or standard sites, and theme standardizations, and you know, there's a couple of other hooks into try to make motion on the same basic problem. But if we can get, you know, if we can get one actually in motion, I think that moves the ball forward for everything.
So the one thing that I really loved that you said is that custom themes should not be a barrier for entry to using backdrop CMS. And I think that, or the ability to create custom themes. And I think that that is sort of the big takeaway there. And all of the other things we're going to be working on can go around that. So like, we need to make it easier for people to put on a theme for their site that works the way they think it works. We need to make it easier for them to demo those themes ahead of time. We need to make it easier for them to customize that theme once they have it. All of those things kind of fit together into that, like, reduce the barrier to entry, overall, I don't know if it's a desire, necessity, maybe. And I think that sounds really great. And I think that I personally am really interested in working on that one. So I hope that. Okay.
Well, I think your phrase there that maybe I spewed out, but that you focused in on of reduce the barrier to entry. I mean, that really is the key concept. You know, even if we like programming, we like working these things ourselves, it just makes it hard for user. I mean, I'll do a metaphor with a car. Like even somebody that likes to work on cars doesn't expect that people who drive cars should know how to change the oil. You know, it's not bad if you can, but you should be able to drive a car even if you don't know how to do that.
Yeah. Yeah. Great analogy.
Sure.
Any thoughts, Tim?
Well, are there other things we want to talk about, or like, could we try and flesh this out a bit, the actual proposal, because it is still a bit vague. And I mean, I think I appreciate the change you made in the title, Luke, but I think, so by the way, the current title that sort of Luke has is backdrop usable without requiring custom theming. And I admire that goal, and that's something, I mean, that's sort of been my personal initiative as well, in that kind of a broad sense. On the other hand, that sounds fairly abstract, and I like the idea of an initiative that's some sort of in between, that isn't necessarily core themes, but just make more ready-to-use themes available. and we wouldn't have to specify core or contrib. To me, that feels a little bit more specific and actionable. This make backdrop usable without requiring custom theming seems really big and broad, and like it could go in a lot of directions.
I think that's good though for an initiative, and maybe this is something that like we need to figure out as a as a PMC, like what an initiative is. Yeah. But I would want thinking about like how they work for Drupal. I'd want an initiative to be something that will continue to have issues related to it for the next X number of years. And so if it was something like put X theme in core, like that might be a lot of work, but it's very specific and it would have an end. But if it's something like continue to reduce the barrier to entry around theming, that could go on forever. And so that to me seems like a good thing for an initiative. And I don't know if we need to have any specifics for it to be adopted as an initiative. I think the fact that we already have good ideas about things we want to do is really helpful, because it'll be like, look, this is an initiative that's actionable, rather than like, we want to make everything better, which is, you know, a little too vague. But yeah, I don't know. I would like to spend some time working on the proposal. I think it would be good to make it read more so that you're comfortable with it. But I know there's one issue that we wanted to talk about today in this meeting. Maybe we should do that first and then change gears. Yep. Does that sound good? Okay, so this is something that Peter asked to have added to the agenda. It is issue number 1140. And this came up back in 1.14. When 1.14 was out, we committed a fix to both 1.14 and 1.13 that tried to solve a problem with in Backdrop, we have the ability to float an image, which is something that you couldn't do in Drupal. So that in the field configuration, you can say image on the left, image on the right, and it'll move it right and left, which is great. But in the area, the surrounding area, we have a clear fix class on it, which was supposed to fix the rendering of whatever comes next in a list or on the page. And in some cases, that was not a good enough solution for the floated image. So if you had other fields that came after it, they might end up, and inside the wrapper might end up looking funny. And so we implemented a CSS solution, which affected the front end of websites that when deployed, broke a whole bunch of websites that were live. And so a bunch of us that had websites that were broken when we deployed that next release had to go and implement a bunch of CSS solutions to the fix that went in core. And we decided in the issue queue that this problem was a big enough change that it needed to be reverted. And we decided that people like myself who had already implemented a CSS fix, the revert of the change would not break our sites again. And so it was sort of like consensus, okay, we'll revert it, yay, and then nothing happened. And so now we're running into these problems where people who are upgrading from Drupal 7 are hitting issues with this particular CSS change as well. So it seems like it's having more problems than just affecting what we thought we were fixing in Backdrop. And so BWPN just wanted to ask, like, what is the process on doing the revert, especially now that we're 2 versions later? Do people still feel that it is safe to revert a commit that was made a long time ago? Or is it something that we should just say, everybody who's run into this problem originally has had to work around it? Maybe we just continue to make new people who run into it have to work around it. I wanted to get feedback from people in this design meeting on whether you think that would have an impact. One thing, so for the 2 sites that I reported that ran into the issue, they're the first 2 I updated. I ran into the problem right away, so I posted screenshots of them on there. I reverted the commit on those, and none of my changes needed to be adjusted at all, so it was fine. I don't know if the way that I implemented a fix is going to be the same way that everybody else implemented a fix, and I don't know if there are going to be any changes that would be necessary from reverting that. But my thought is that I would much rather have it be easy for new people running into using Backdrop to not encounter that problem than for those of us who've already worked around it and understand that exactly what the issue is and have some knowledge of it, be able to make a change in order to get it to work back. So rather than making new people have to learn about the problem, I would rather make people who already know about the problem do some work on it especially knowing that like we might not have to do any work on it. Tim, I'm not sure if you remember this issue or not, but I know you ran into it at some point, and I wanted to get your feedback on it in particular.
Sure. Well, I actually don't recall running into this. I think you might be seeing my a comment I made in the issue queue, and that was really just because I was going through the issue queue and saw like, hey, we're going to revert this, and nothing was happening.
Okay.
So it's more me being helpful than actually dealing with the issue.
Oh. Well, thank you for being helpful.
Trying to be helpful.
Do you have any thoughts on, in general, front-facing breaking CSS change getting reverted?
So no, I mean, off the top of my head, I'm torn on this. So the thing about people coming from Drupal 7, I'm not sure. I quickly skimmed the issue. Is that something you've? Here's, I guess, hand to put this. I got it. Yeah, I mean, I guess if that is a D7 migration thing, that would be an argument for doing it. I mean,
Yeah.
I could see if it was just breaking things that people had done in Backdrop before, and it's been this long, there might be an argument that it's no longer, that we missed the opportunity to fix it. But if it's breaking D7 sites, then we should probably figure that out.
So is it a bug that existed in D7 that was just never really noticed and
no,
around for years?
There was a bug in Drupal 7. I'm not sure everyone will call it a bug, that when you first put an image in a piece of content, it would stack vertically and you couldn't align it left or right. And so we added a feature into Backdrop that allowed you to float the image left or right with a like drop down list, like where do you want your image displayed? And when we introduced that feature, we also introduced the possibility of if you float an image left or right, the text underneath it might start to behave oddly. And so we were attempting to fix that, but in fixing that, we broke a bunch of stuff that doesn't have anything to do with that. And so when it was tested, we tested it against core, but not against like a bunch of live sites that already had a bunch of fields in places. So we didn't notice that it caused other repercussion problems. But after we deployed it, we were like, oh, oops, yes, this is going to be an issue. And there were a couple of people that recommended like more changes that we could make that would fix it in some instances. But because we've already made one like oopsie, we thought rather than continuing to try and fix it and maybe make more problems, it would be smarter to go backwards to a thing that we know didn't have the same kind of issues. So essentially, if we were to revert the change, we would end up back in a state where if you float an image and you have text underneath it, it might wrap oddly around the image and you'd have to fix that. So this is something that anyone who already had a live Backdrop site had already fixed. Anyone who's coming from Drupal 7 had run into this issue, floated their own image and fixed it also. So if you're upgrading a theme, it would have sort of already been resolved. But new people creating a new Backdrop site might run into problems if they try and align an image left or right and the text underneath it wraps funny. So we would eventually need to introduce a fix that would solve that, but maybe not something that's similar to the fix that we have now, something we're sure wouldn't cause sort of cascading problems elsewhere.
Right.
So we're reverting a fix, but maybe gonna redo it in a way that's less dangerous.
Right. I think it's kind of obvious that the preference would be that we do both of these at once, but realistically, unless somebody's really gung-ho and got an idea for that, it's better to just step back and like what you were saying. Is my inclination, yeah.
And the kinds of problems we're seeing with the fix were also really bizarre, where I think that for someone who's familiar with CSS, even looking at that, it's a little weird to be like, why does half my content just disappear from the page? Like it's a very strange like browser bug that happened with that particular fix, where I think we could probably find a fix that would be less bizarre. And I think that people who aren't familiar with CSS might be comfortable putting in a little like clear on some field somewhere, but they're not going to be comfortable with fixing the kind of mess that we just created by fixing the bug in a strange way. So I think that just in terms of the solution from getting from something's a little wonky with my website to it's fixed is going to be a much shorter path if we go back with the original bug rather than the new bug that we've introduced now. And I don't know why the solution we implemented does that. It could be like a very strange, like new browser thing. But yeah, it was something that it took me a really long time to figure out why half the content on my page disappeared. And I was like, what? How does this one page do that? But yeah, so an interesting dilemma. Okay, well, it sounds like, Joseph, I don't know if you have any thoughts on this. I'm not sure if you've run into this problem and had to fix it on any of your background sites.
I have not run into this.
Okay. Yeah, it sounds like we're still sort of the same opinion we were originally. And I think that at this point we should kick it to a core committer to weigh in. And I know Peter's a core committer, which is why he asked for us to talk about it, because he didn't feel confident being the one to make the decision. So maybe we should have him talk about it with Nate or Herb or Jeff and see what they think about risk of reverting a change this late. But it sounds like in terms of those of us who are going to use the solution, we're fine with it being reverted. Okay, thank you.
I mean, it ties in just in terms of making me believe in the, ready to go theme initiative thing, because it highlights how hard this stuff is.
Yeah.
When I first put together my first Drupal site a decade ago, everything went swimmingly until it got like to theming and hands. And that's when I was like, holy cow, this is so much harder than I thought it was going to be.
Yeah.
So,
and I was just thinking about that too, as we were talking about it, in terms of like, well, we're going to require that you know at least this tiny bit of CSS in order to be able to move your things around. It doesn't sound great. But it is a little bit of an edge case where this problem appears. Is probably why like Joseph and Tim haven't run into it. And I think it was like a very specific combination of like, you need to have one, field after another field that doesn't have a wrapper on it or something like that. And most of the time when you add two fields in a row, the second one has a wrapper on it and it'll, work with, an image and whatever, it'll be okay. But under some circumstances, you can get it to a point where it gets a little wonky. And so I think I would rather have the edge case oddness than the, I have no idea what's going on with my site. Something weird happened in CSS oddness that we've got now, which I think might even be more consistent than the original problem. But yeah, it's one of those things I wouldn't expect somebody who is not a front-end developer to be able to go in and fix that. Like if you just installed a backdrop site, right, had to figure that out, that would be not ideal. Okay. So that was the only urgent issue. There are a bunch of other usability issues. If you're interested in usability, you can check the issue queue for any issue with square bracket, capital U, capital X, square brackets. If you're particularly interested in design issues, we have a tag on them, which I think is just the word design. You can look at those also. But I think we're going to use the rest of our time to talk about the design theme initiative.
But let me just say one thing for the record, which is about the timeline right now, because design and usability issues could still get into the next release, right, which is in a week. So for anybody who's watching this and is interested in these things, now is a great time to get design or bug or usability bug fixes in, because we can get them into the next release very soon. I just wanted to add that to the record.
That's great. Thank you. Okay, so back to the initiative proposal. I like the title, also the new title. I think in terms of making updates to the proposal itself, do you have any specific recommendations, Tim, based on your reading or?
Well, I want to say two things. One of which is that, I agree with a lot of the things you were saying earlier. I think my view of initiatives is that they could go on for years, but that they could also be fairly specific and limited. It could be, to bring a specific feature into core, and it could be that initiative is over in 6 months. I think that's legitimate too. My concern about the sort of this title about just making it easier, make backdrop usable without requiring custom theming is, you mentioned like fix all the things is too broad, and this isn't that broad. but to me, it feels like it has that too broadness to it. It's like it could, like a lot of the stuff. As I said, I'm interested in this topic, and I define exactly this as something that I've been trying to work on. But for me, I've been trying to work on it in a way that has nothing to do with themes. And so there's like, these are two completely different directions this could go, and neither of them are bad, but it's like, is it too vague? That's all I'm asking. And I could live with this as a title. I'm not.
You're unhappy that there isn't a clear definition of done, right?
Well, I don't know that it needs a clear definition of done, but I would at least like if I'm going to sign up to participate in an initiative, to me, it's like, this feels like it could go in a lot of different directions. I don't know what I'm signing up for here, right? Like, making more themes of, easy to use themes available for Backdrop. That is also not really a done point, right? That could go on for years. But on the other hand, I know what it means when I read it. And this, I don't quite, there's a lot.
Yeah, well, I changed it intentionally to make it more vague.
Right. And it might have went a little bit too far, but maybe not. Again, I'm interested in this topic. I can live with that. I'm just throwing that out as something that sort of a gut reaction to it as an initiative.
So it sounds like from reading it that the takeaway for the actual proposal is like, make 3 good themes, period.
Yeah.
Okay. And so I think that maybe that would be a good place to start. And we could note some of these other things that we need in order to do that as part of the process. So you could say something like, okay, well, the goal is to make 3 themes that you can just put on and see what your site looks like with whatever. You originally recommended those going in core. We had people who said they should be in contrib. I don't really care where they are. We have a pretty good install process for contrib. I think the problem is that once you put them on a site, they're not necessarily going to look good. And so what we need to do is take the themes that are like done and take them to that point where it's going to give a really good impression when people try them on. And I think that that might be a good place to start, where it will be like, we need to have 3 very solid examples of different themes that look good on a variety of Backdrop sites. And in order to get there, we need to make the themes. That's obviously pretty clear, but we also need a way to determine whether a theme is going to look good on a wide variety of Backdrop sites. We need a way to promote that theme onto the Backdrop site that you have now. So that would be the promoted modules feature that we're working on now, so that when you go there, you know which one you should try on to get the good impression. There's a bunch of other stuff that kind of rolls up into that. But I think that if we can maybe focus that on 3 themes that make Backdrop have a stronger first impression, that might help control the scope a little for Tim. And it would also include all of the like meta stuff that I really want to fix in terms of our process.
So in terms of the initiative process, is there potentially kind of a 2-step approach to it, where you identify the problem you're trying to solve, and then once we've agreed that, okay, we're going to try to solve the problem, rather than launch into it with totally open scope, the next step is, okay, now we define what the MVP at this point is going to be.
Yeah, I think once we decide on what the initiatives are, and that'll probably be based on the proposals, it'll be up to the initiative lead to help sort of guide the next steps of the process. So I really like what you're saying in terms of like, first let's pick a thing and then let's like make some actionable items out of it and move towards them. But it might be different for each initiative. And I think that, for if Gregory has a like fix all the tiny bugs initiative or something, that might look very different than, fix the underlying problem with themes in CMS's problem. And I think that's okay. But that's why we have proposals, because we want to know what people want to do. So if you make a solid proposal, even if it's different from all the other ones, I think that's still valid.
So I have a question. What would be a differentiating factor between 2 themes?
You mean in terms of how, like, in order to get a different impression?
Right. Like, so we have in Drupal 7, when you go look for themes, it would oftentimes be, this is a 3-column layout theme with blue highlights that uses this particular font.
Yeah.
But with the layout system and the color module and then the font your face module, all 3 of those things are gone as far as differentiating factors for themes.
Yeah.
So
I mean, so I think that we're going to run into that if we pick any differentiating factor. There's going to be a contrib module that'll let you undo it, just because of the world we happen to live in. But I think that layouts are definitely no longer a thing, because that's like a core feature that we support, and contrib themes should, in theory, look good with all 10 core layouts in one way or another. And I don't know that like color. Like most themes aren't going to have color support, I would imagine, based on Drupal 7. And so I would imagine that like so there are a couple of themes even in Drupal 6 where you install them and it's like, this theme is available in the following 4 palettes, but it didn't give you like customization thing. So there's something called 4 seasons that I used a couple of times where you get like a green one for spring or a red one for summer or a yellow one for fall or a blue one for winter or whatever, but that was kind of it. And I think that it would, I'm not a designer, so I'm probably not using the right words for this, but in terms of like my experience with WordPress, like you can pick a theme, like you can search for green, and then when you download the green theme, you can make it purple. Or, I mean, that's just, it's just like it's a thing that, I don't know, it seems like the color is sort of not really that important. It's more about the like impression it gives you. And as a non-designer, I don't really know how to describe that, but I think like I don't know, I have some things that are like super like parallaxy and like a lot of animations and JavaScript and stuff that I really dislike and try and remove when I first get them. And then there's other ones that like, this is just like gives you 8 ways to display your content, and that's kind of it, and it doesn't have a lot of, there's maybe white space or I don't know. I'm the wrong person to answer this, but I would say that the answer to that question is in the eye of the designer.
I have an answer that I'm willing.
Sure, please help.
Well, I mean, and for what it's worth, I have found, when looking for themes myself, when trying to solve this problem as a user, when I've seen theme descriptions, even when I find ones that aren't base themes, I still find it frustrating. Like, this is a blog theme, and I'm like, what the hell does that mean? So, but the kind of things, to give an example of 3 or 4 themes that I could imagine coming through in Backdrop, I imagine it in terms of audience, right? So if to take a couple of buzzwords, you might have one that's oh shit, I had the buzzword in my mind a second ago. What's the like the flat look that Google has, the material design, right? Like there's the flat material design. I could imagine a theme that's like the opposite of that's 3D Windows 95 shadows and highlights look. I can imagine one that's skeuomorphic, that has wood grain and marble and leaves and things. I can imagine a look that's intended for little kids, that features teddy bears and crayons and big fonts and comfortable things. I can imagine one that's designed to look boring for your corporate thing, that's shades of gray on white. So just a couple of options there, so that you get a range of that, and then with that as a baseline, then we might be able to, over time, enhance the taxonomy so that we can come up with the most meaningful differentiators for what matters. And when we have themes, ultimately, that they're like, well, A, B, and C are basically just the same thing, then only include one of them. But if you think about it, just sort of like audience, a theme for little kids, a theme for corporate site, a theme for edgy teenagers. How's that? I'm
I
not
guess
seeing
that
great
works.
excitement.
I don't know.
That didn't seem to
Like,
go over well.
I like audience, but I also think there can be, like, you could get three very different feelings from a theme based on like intended for the same audience. And I don't know what it is that makes it feel different because it's like outside my sphere of understanding. But I know that I can like look at corporate sites and be like, oh, this one is like boring and gray. And then look at another one and be like, oh, this is like kind of colorful and exciting, but it's still kind of corporate. I don't know. Like there's definitely a way that designers can get those things. But I don't know how to label that. I wouldn't, and I'm not sure that this labeling thing is a solved problem in the theme world either. Like maybe we should look at some theme websites and see like, and I'm not even sure if the people who are posting them know what to label. I don't know. I mean,
Yeah, no, I completely agree. Like it's an unsolved problem, and we don't have to solve it. All we have to do is have more than one option, so that you know, create some space.
yeah.
And then once you're like, this is different from that, then you can be like, oh, well, you know, there's subtler forms, you know.
I also
you-
think like if we aren't going to be able to solve it, we definitely need the way to let people see it, right? Because if you can't describe it, you have to let them like experience it, and so that pushes more on the need for having a demo site or an easier way to try things on.
Well, I mean, I'll go for a record store. Remember those records and stores? A record store metaphor, like you walk in and you know, there's lots and lots and lots and lots of genres and subgenres and tastes within music, but you could be like classical, jazz, you know, kids music, like there's broad strokes that you can have that are distinctly different. And you could imagine as a demo, like, you know, play me some classical music. You'd be like, you know, whether it's a symphony or, you know, a fugue, it's still, you know, very, very different from rap or country, right? So that's all I'm looking for is a couple of choices so that people understand what we mean by theme.
Yeah.
all right.
Tim, you're muted.
You're muted.
When did I mute myself? I have in my head an idea of what this looks like. I think probably similar to what Luke does. My problem with this whole issue is like what that practically means, underlying technology-wise, when we break apart themes, and I think this idea of building having a demo site where you can try on different skins and sort of show that there are themes and show that they work is a first step. I don't want to talk more about this right now because I think it's something that this initiative group is going to have to address, and it's going to take more time than we have right now. So I'll just say, you know, the description that we talked about for this initiative, like, you know, making sure there's at least that, you know, to me that might even be again too specific, but I'm okay with that. And I've raised a few concerns, but none of those are blockers. Like, I think they can be worked around. I think we before this gets voted on by the PMC, it's going to have to be fleshed out a tiny bit, but there's nothing about it that's super problematic. I don't know what more to say about it right now, other than I just feel like it needs more definition. So
yeah. So in a sense, I wanted to maintain the continuum. But even though I changed the title, I included in the body of the proposal what the old title was,
right,
so that
Yep.
so you can kind of bounce between those. It's like, you know, some of that, some of this, you know, what do you specifically mean by that? Well, here's the specifics. That's too limiting. Well, here's the general.
Sure, I think we can work with this. We'll have to figure this out a bit. What are the other issues around submitting? It needs to have, I'm working off the top of my head, but sort of the criteria for initiative was one that it had some definition. I think we talked about it actually, although this has not been a final decision. We talked about it having some sort of an end goal. I don't think that's required. But one thing that I think we all agreed was that a formal initiative proposal would need a lead, right? We don't want to start an initiative if there's nobody willing to take charge of it.
And that you don't have to stay the lead forever. not
Right.
anyone in particular, but just someone to sort of be like, hey, I am really passionate about this and I want to help get it moving forward. And if you can commit to, you know, having conversations like this for 6 months to a year, that's fantastic. And if something happens and you can't continue, there's always a way out. But just, we don't want to be like, this is an initiative and then have nothing happen.
Right.
I am totally, I'd be delighted to be the lead for this. I am happy to project lead this until it's ready for release.
Personally, I wouldn't call this a requirement, but for me, like as a PMC member, what I would be looking for to vote for in an initiative is some sort of a broad outline of like what the plan of action is. Like, I don't, different initiatives can handle this differently. So it doesn't necessarily mean that it needs regular meetings or that it needs anything in particular. But if you came to me and said, this initiative is going to meet once a month, or it's going to meet bi-weekly, and our first 2 meetings are going to be setting goals, and that is going to make the initiative sound much more useful to me than if it's like, oh, we have this broad topic and we're going to figure it all out later. So to the extent that we could put a little bit of definition, like how is this initiative going to work? Again, not a requirement, but helpful. And I don't know if you have any thoughts on that, Luke, or.
I mean, basically the goal is in the title now, you know, make it, right. And I need to include the wording that Jen and I bounced back between ourselves of remove barriers to entry. And to achieve that, like the initial straw man MVP was include 3 themes. Sure. but I didn't want that to be the limiting thing, like it's either yes or no on that. I'm like, well, you know, or it include 3 ready to go themes unless we come up with something better. And we can time box how long we have to try to come up with something better. But if we can't, let's just do that.
Okay.
Okay. Well, we are out of time here, so I'm going to recommend that we wrap this meeting and we can continue talking about this maybe in the next meeting or maybe in a standalone initiative meeting. Right. But yeah, thank you guys for the excellent powwow on it, and see you again in a few minutes.